There are a lot of terms to Marxism. The piece that really sticks with us, and I think still has one of the most important impacts, because we really, in American culture, don't understand the bourgeois. It's not that we don't understand it. We don't see our society as broken into the bourgeois and the proletariat. And so because we don't see it reflected in our own culture, we have a hard time buying into Marxism, which is totally fair. Like, we need to see ourselves in things. Otherwise, we have a really hard time with them. But the idea of hegemony is a lot more global and a lot more universal. And so in the chapters, I'm on page 269, they're describing hegemony. And so the definition here is simply understood as ruling by consent. And so this is where, because Marx believed that hegemony is formed when we're ruling by consent, the more people that consent, and he's talking numbers, the more people that consent and buy into this particular definition and this particular understanding, the more power they have to subvert the bourgeois. So we're seeing this play out with all of the strikes that we're seeing across the nation right now. The writer's strike and the actor's strike are two really, really, really important examples of this. We've also seen doctors and nurses strike. We've seen teachers strike over the last few years. With the writer's strike, one of the things that we heard, especially really early on, and I know at the time of this video, the writer's strike is now over, so maybe we'll get new entertainment again soon, but the actor's strike is still going on. It's still ongoing, and they're still arguing for their view of the world, especially in relation to artificial intelligence and AI. So the writer's strike, we heard very early on, one of the CEOs, and I can't remember which one, say, oh, we just need the strike to last long enough that we're going to starve the writers out of their houses. And all of the writers were like, too late, already there, even under the terms, when we had terms and we were working writers. Because of the change in streaming and the impact of the streaming platforms, writers were already starving and poor and not able to afford rent. And so what Marx is getting at with hegemony, especially with his idea of the bourgeois and the proletariat, the more people, so writer strike and numbers, the sheer volume of numbers of writers who went on strike should have been able to overpower the CEOs fairly immediately and fairly quickly, because the volume difference. So according to Marx, and this is obviously where Marxism kind of falls apart, because he is saying, according to numbers, there are more writers than there are CEOs. In total, there are what, like 10, I'm making this up. There are like 10 CEOs that run these film companies, television companies, Disney, like all of that. And there are 110 writers. Again, I'm making these numbers up. Even so, 110 to 10, the number balance and the sheer volume of people who are all coming together to say, this is how we're defining something, hegemony, this is what we're consenting to, hegemony, should have been able to then change the 10 because of volume. So it falls apart. But hegemony is still really, really important for understanding. If we just look at the number of people who went on strike and how they talked about what they were looking for and what they wanted and what their demands were, we saw hegemony in that group. When we saw the CEOs pushing back, we saw hegemony in their language and in their view of the world, what they were defining and how they were defining it and what their terms were. And that's what we usually see between groups, is we see hegemony within group. They have consensus on how they are making meaning and how they are defining their terms and how they are defining the boundaries of their groups. But that doesn't necessarily mean just because they have more numbers that the volume is going to help overcome, which was Marx's idea. Hegemony sticks around because it's really important and powerful to understand how a group comes together and co-defines terms. It's amazing.